What's up? If I were to ask you, when did the Civil Rights Movement begin? What would be the first date that popped in your head? What if I told you it actually started in 1947 when Jackie Robinson became the first African American baseball player in the major leagues? Now, that was just the start of something that would turn into the Civil Rights Movement, but it showed the African American community that they needed to do something and they needed to do something fast.
And I want you to know tonight that we as a people will get to the promised land. Mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord.
This prompted a young lawyer named Thurgood Marshall in 1950 to go to the Supreme Court and say, listen, why is law school segregated? This is messed up. We need to desegregate law school. Now, the Supreme Court, who is probably full of white racists, ruled that in favor of Thurgood Marshall's case. Their ideology behind it was, how many African Americans are lawyers right now? You know what I mean? These people are they're oppressed. They come from bad home lives because nobody has any money in that community. I mean, how many African American lawyers are there? Not very many. Very far and few between. You see, Thurgood had a plan, and the plan was set into action with this Supreme Court ruling. The reason this was set into action because of this was one word. It's called precedent. With precedent being in mind, how could they desegregate upper school and then somehow still defend the segregation of lower schools, lower public schools, like high schools and middle schools and grade schools? Thurgood Marshall is an unsung hero of the Civil Rights Movement. He was one of the very first people to step in, and he had a plan. And when you look back at this stuff, it's just amazing that these people knew what they were doing. Like, it wasn't just, oh, let's do this. It was, this is going to cause this, which is going to cause this. There was a plan, and it was set into action. Because of Thurgood Marshall's courage to present his case to the Supreme Court and for the Supreme Court to uphold his case, it resulted in, 6 years later, the decision of Brown v. Board of Education, which basically ruled that segregation of public schools is illegal. The reason you hear about certain people during the Civil Rights Movement is because they were great leaders, don't get me wrong, but also because they were great problem solvers and great planners. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and Rosa Parks, watch my last video about the 1960s Civil Rights Movement if you haven't. I go into depth about how they set up the whole bus boycott thing. And this is another case of Thurgood Marshall coming in and setting up something, knowing that down the line it'll come back and it'll be a great thing, because at the time it was just purely symbolic. But with precedent set, that allowed for greater growth and greater accomplishments in the civil rights era.